here in the sanctuary, and we're going to hear Jack lead our worship service and chant from Parshat Acharei Mot. It's just amazing, Jack. I take a special joy having a few years back had the privilege of naming the newborn son of my neighbors. So really, just don't get any taller between tonight and I'm going to freak out. It's good. It's all good. So this week's Torah portion is, as Jack will tell us, Acharei Mot. And tonight I want to talk about the fact that it introduces the word scapegoat, a term not actually used in the Hebrew. That term scapegoat was introduced by the Protestant scholar William Tyndale in 1530, so almost 500 years ago, in his English translation of the 5 books of Moses in Leviticus chapter 16. The word scapegoat is Tyndale's English translation of the Hebrew word Azazel, found in Leviticus 16:8. We read, "V'natan Aharon al shnei haseirim goralot, goral echad ladonai v'goral echad lazazel." It's not your section, so don't worry. "And Aaron shall cast lots upon the 2 goats, one lot for Adonai and the other lot for Azazel. This second goat, to bear the community's sins on its heads, was understood to have simply gone free, to have escaped the fate of its other partner goat, which was a sin offering, sacrificed. Tyndale named this goat, actually in his earliest translation, the scapegoat, which evolved later to be used as scapegoat. In the Bible, a scapegoat then is one of these one of the pair of young kid goats. As a pair, one goat was sacrificed as a chatat, as a sin offering. The second living goat, the scapegoat, escaping the fate of the first goat, was released into the wilderness, taking with it all the nation's sins and impurities. You'll get more from Jack tomorrow. By the way, Tyndale's translation choice seems to be influenced by the description found later on in verse 22, which you are chanting. "The goat shall bear on itself all their iniquities to a barren region, and the goat shall be set free in the wilderness." Set free isn't too far from the notion of escape. Maybe Tyndale could have called the goat, instead of a scapegoat, a set-free goat. I don't know. It's about the same. Regardless, English found in this hybrid word choice, scapegoat, a portmanteau to express something more than the mere vehicle of relieving and transporting away the community's guilt and sins. The scapegoat was merely, but importantly, the final closing step in a day-long, 24-hour-long rite. A rite is a collection of rituals. A 24-hour-long rite of national admission and contrition for wrongdoing. Today, in contrast, when we utilize the term scapegoat, we are making a moral judgment regarding an individual we consider to have been wronged. A judgment that proclaims our opinion that this individual, scapegoated, has been wrongly condemned for the wrongs performed by others. The Oxford Languages Dictionary defines scapegoat as, quote, "a person who is blamed for the wrongdoings, mistakes, or faults of others, especially for reasons of expediency." Wikipedia, I know, but in this case it's useful. Wikipedia offers, quote, "Scapegoating is the practice of singling out a person or a group for unmerited blame and consequent negative treatment." I want to repeat that. Unmerited blame and consequent negative treatment. So over the past 500 years, from 1530, when Tyndale invented the term, the word scapegoat has morphed into something somewhat different than its origins. Today, a scapegoat really refers to, when we use it, to a fall guy or a fall gal, who is wrongly utilized to take the blame for the misdeeds of others. Scapegoating a person, instead of relieving anyone of sin and guilt, is nowadays actually a sin in and of itself. Al chet shechatanu, for the sin of scapegoating others rather than admitting to our own wrongdoing. But this modern utilization, this modern understanding of the scapegoat, loses sight of the ancient biblical impulse behind that goat that was sent off into the wilderness. Rather than an instrument with which to deny or deflect deserved blame and guilt, the biblical scapegoat was instead a means of discharging guilt after having admitted and acknowledged the community's wrongdoings. The scapegoat, while not a sacrifice in and of itself, was paired with its twin, the goat that we know as the sin offering, which was sacrificed first as a public admission and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. You can't have a scapegoat without a sin goat offering. They're a pair, they go together. One doesn't work without the other on Yom Kippur. Only after this public admission and acknowledgement was the scapegoat's role recognized as effective. If you tried to send the scapegoat out before you took care of the original, it didn't do any good. Our ancestors, in fact, would be amazed and aghast that we would think you could transfer the burden of wrongdoing and its accompanying guilt onto the scapegoat without first admitting, acknowledging, and atoning for that wrongdoing via the earlier ritual of the chatat, the sin offering of the first goat. By the way, you know this whole routine from services on the very long triple admission recited by the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, which we recite in the prayer book every Yom Kippur. Before the scapegoat, even before the sin offering, the high priest comes forward and admits to the guilt of himself, his family, all the other priests, and then the entire nation. Without that verbal admission, all the ritual is useless. It is impossible to make amends, to do teshuvah, to repent, if one bypasses the public process of admission and acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Our modern version of scapegoating, of blaming and transferring guilt and responsibility to some fall guy or fall gal, reminds me of what passes for our modern version of an apology. You've heard it. I apologize if I unintentionally offended you in any way. There's something missing, isn't there? It's not a real apology. Likewise, today we see corporations, fictional persons, behaving in a similar manner. The government, for example, announces some giant settlement with a corporation that's been accused of some wrongdoing. And the corporation agrees to pay some massive multi-million-dollar fine, but announces in its press release something along the lines of this: while neither admitting nor denying any wrongdoing, said corporation has agreed to pay this multi-million-dollar settlement to put the issue behind it. This is, I think, a sort of inverse scapegoat. No one is at fault. There's no one to be held accountable. There is no guilt at all. There's no wrongdoing. Fines are paid, but nothing is admitted and nothing is acknowledged. Don't you miss the goat now? While this may work for corporations, I have to tell you, I don't believe it works for us human beings, who are as much creatures of psyche and spirit as we are of flesh and blood. Jewish tradition offers us the wisdom that an admission of wrongdoing by itself, the rituals of removing guilt, actions of teshuvah, none of them work alone. They are a rite. They are a gestalt. They're all part of a process. It is through a combination of efforts that we attempt to achieve forgiveness. And that process can never even begin if our first inclination and effort is to assign guilt elsewhere, whether on the head of a goat or, far worse, to the hands of the innocent scapegoat. Shabbat Shalom.